fellow Americans.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
A functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They're 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal health care. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a program for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
it would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you to guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth-makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Mm-hmm. one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, you know, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Hello, Rebels. Welcome to Redacted on this Wednesday edition of The Big Show. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we seek the truth wherever it takes us. We cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. And we have got a very busy show for you on this Wednesday. I mean, just a few moments ago, we learned that Sam Bankman-Fried is going to be extradited to the United States. He'll be going to the same prison where Jeffrey Epstein was, which is great.
That sounds like a joke.
I know it sounds like a joke, but it's
I'd like to say for
real.
the record... I'd like to say for the record that SBF did not kill himself.
Right.
Okay.
We're going to say that now.
Preemptively.
Yeah, make sure you put him in the cell where the cameras aren't working.
How can that
That's true.
have been ordained?
I know, like, we live in a clown world. We live in an absolute clown world. Another, you know, and then you have Zelensky going to the White House just a few moments ago. We're going to bring you that latest news on the traveling of the Ukrainian president via White House envoy and black SUV limousine service to the White House. We've got the spending bill, which we're going to cover, of course, which is they're trying to scramble to get this done before morning time tomorrow, dawn on Thursday morning, $1.7 trillion. Wait till you see what is in this thing. We're going to go through all of the little pieces of this. It's an absolute disaster. I think you're literally watching the United States collapse right before your eyes. So that's fun. We're going to cover that story.
We are also going to talk about the COVID vaccine and how some new data seems to show that people who have more vaccinations actually are more prone to COVID. This is preliminary data. We're going to go through it. It is shocking. The mainstream media seems utterly uninterested.
And what about giving out reparations 160 years after the fact? Like, does that make any sense at all? Well, in the Netherlands, it does. So we're going to tell you about that a little bit later in the show.
Plus, we are going to talk about Mr. Zelensky coming to Washington, all the red carpet that was rolled out for said person.
Yeah, and not putting on a suit, but making sure he's wearing his finest green sweatshirt. Also, it's an end of an era at CNN. And it was a really emotional moment yesterday at the Pentagon. I'm just going to leave it at that. Wait until you see this amazing video. We've got a jam-packed show for you on this Wednesday. Buckle up. Please subscribe to the channel. Smash that like button. It pushes us further out into the algorithm. So because we're up against the algorithm here on YouTube, and but not on Rumble. Our Rumble friends, we love you. There's no censorship over there. So with that being said, Redacted starts right now. Oh, yes. Sam Bankman-Fried. Unbelievable.
Do you think that sometimes in this world it's like, okay, they figured us out. All of the conspiracies are true. Mm-hmm. Now we can just go with it. We don't have to hide it anymore.
What the WEF has done. Like all this stuff Alex Jones was saying about the globalists and all this stuff. They were like, oh, that's not happening. That's not happening. And now they're just out there in the open doing it.
Yeah, all the stuff that we were saying, that can't be true. That absolutely can't be the case. New World Order. I mean, wait until you see what's in the spending bill we're going to get to in a few minutes. I mean, it sounds like a conspiracy, like when you're like, no, that can't possibly be in a bill that Congress is about to pass. Oh, it's there. Wait until you see some of this stuff. It's unbelievable.
I feel like that about the Twitter files every time I see it, especially the one yesterday, because it was about a report that we had covered 3 months ago, saying that the government does, in fact, spend a lot of time faking social media accounts in order to sow discord into foreign countries. And I was like, I believe it, but man, this feels far out there. And then we see it before our very eyes. And I'm just losing my mind about how all of this crazy stuff continues to fall into place.
I really hope.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just really hoping that salmon gets some of it. Like salmon really deserves some of that money.
Oh, so
salmon! I got my fingers crossed for salmon.
Salmon has been mentioned over 60 some times inside this new spending bill. Don't worry about that. Your salmon are going to be safe and protected thanks to the spending bill. But yeah, 6, 7, 8 months ago, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about here on the show has come to pass. Yeah. I mean, the list is actually pretty damn long. If you want to go through it, we can. But we've literally this afternoon talking about a UN resolution moving towards regime change in Haiti. We've been talking about the United States involvement in the overthrow of the Haitian government. So that's about to happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, the list is endless with the things that we've been talking about and covering on this show that are now happening before our eyes. One of which is the total and utter collapse of Ukraine, which we've been saying from the very beginning was going to happen. And now we're going to get into the details of that in just a few minutes, a little bit later in the show. Some of the unbelievable details coming out of Ukraine. So you want to stick around for that.
All right. First, I want to tell you about our newsletter. But before we do that, I want to say David is traveling. And can we bring up his shot again? Who goes on a vacation with lights like that?
I know. I'm like, where are you? He's like, I'm in a hotel. Lights. He's got like filming lights. Like, who brings the pink lights? Are you going to like a rave later?
I say that's dedication. You're traveling and you still bring your gear with you. So thank you for joining us, even from a remote, undisclosed location.
The show is like my top priority. So I was like, how can I make this look good? Because the hotel lighting is usually the incandescent, ugly yellow. And I'm like, no, that will not work. So I bring my setup in.
Not just any lighting will do.
Well, Jem, you are truly outrageous.
I love it.
All right. We do have a daily newsletter we want to tell you about. And we had like 1,100 new subscribers to our newsletter last night. So much love to all of you. It's totally free. We hope we bring you value. You can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes over your cup of coffee first thing in the morning. All you need to do is go to our website, which is redacted.inc, not .com. Redacted.inc, because people say, I go to redacted.com and I can't find your website. That's because we don't own that website. It's redacted.inc, incorporated, and just put in your email address. We'll send you a welcome email. You have to verify that you want to receive our newsletter Monday through Friday. And we publish, again, you can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes. We cover some big stories of the day, some of the top news, things you might have missed while you were sleeping, some of the market news, what's going on with gold prices, what's happening with your 401k, all of that stuff, and some of the big stories. So again, redacted.inc is the place to go. And like I said, it'll make you really cool in the new year. Like this is a New Year's resolution. All of the cool kids, you just see them at the mall hanging around in the food court talking about the Redacted newsletter. I can't get over it. I really am surprised by that.
Yeah, pretty sure my daughter and her friends, my daughter's 16. Her and her friends never stop talking about it. It gets a little old sometimes.
I know, it's kind of crazy.
I know.
They're driving, they're listening to music, then they stop and they're talking about the Redacted newsletter. I mean, it really touches me.
Yes.
Like it's really hard. So thanks to all the young kids out there who's making it the best.
Yeah. And happy Yule, everyone. It is the pagan solstice today. And so do we have the fire on behind?
We do. Yes, we got the fire. We turned on the fire.
It's the darkest day of the year. So I hope you spend it nicely.
Yeah. Thank you for spending it with us. Let's get into it, shall we? We are watching it all on this longest day of the year, December 21st, first day of winter. We are watching it all collapse right before our eyes, and no one is stopping it at all. I mean, if you needed more evidence that you were watching the United States of America collapse into pieces, and Europe, by the way, being all a part of this giant mess. The Congress about to pass this massive omnibus spending bill, which is $1.7 trillion. Now, they think they're going to be able to pass it by dawn tomorrow morning. So Thursday morning, they're rushing to try to get it done. Now, bear in mind, very few people have even seen more than a few hundred pages of this thing. It's over 4,000 pages long. The price tag is $1.7 trillion, and not one member of Congress has even read the whole thing. But they're going to pass it.
Could you imagine, like, just to go back, could you imagine if Trump was proposing a $1.7 trillion bill? Like, how the media would just be completely losing their minds?
Well, they didn't, though, for COVID spending.
Yeah.
They liked that. And when he said, hey, why do we have money for Israel in a COVID bill, they hated on him. They pushed back.
They're like the deep state. The deep state was like, shut up. You don't ask questions about what's in this bill. And that's part of the plan. You do not ask questions about what's in this thing. Senator Rand Paul wheeled the bill out in like a wheelbarrow yet last night at like 2 a.m. This was 2 a.m. when he wheeled this bill out in front of cameras. God bless the reporters who were actually there filming this at this time. Watch Rand Paul.
I brought with me the Omni, 4,155 pages. When was it produced? In the dead of the night, 1:30 in the morning when it was released. Now, people argue that it's conservatives' fault. You don't have the Christmas spirit. Somehow you're holding up government. Well, whose job is it to produce this? The people in charge of spending, the people in charge of both of the parties. When did they know that this would be necessary? Well, it's in the law, September 30th. You got 9 months, almost 10 months, to produce a plan, to have a spending plan. They weren't ready on September 30th, so they voted themselves 90 more days. They weren't ready last week either, so they voted themselves another week. And now we have it at 1:30 in the morning this morning. But what's the clamor? The clamor is to vote. Vote now. Let's get it done. Why are you standing in the way of spending? Well, the real question is this. What is more dangerous? What is more dangerous to the country? $1.1 trillion in new debt, or as Republican leadership likes to say, oh, but it's a win. It's a big win. We're getting $45 billion for the military. So which is more important? Which threatens the country more? Are we at risk for being invaded by a foreign power if we don't put $45 billion into the military? Or are we more at risk by adding to a $31 trillion debt?
Yeah, good question. I have an answer. It's the debt. We're not being invaded by anybody. The only people that we have to worry about are the countries that we go into and invade and stir up a hornet's nest.
I can't wrap my head around how a document of that size gets produced. Who is it?
Oh,
a shared document that everyone puts there?
Oh, it's just, yeah, special interest. They shove things into this thing at the last minute through committee, and they don't get to see it. No one gets to see it.
How does, who? You know, I can't.
The heads of each committee, and they just throw things in. They don't even get to see it.
And then it's like an open Google Doc, and it just automatically populates.
Yeah, and they don't even get to see what the other committees are putting in. So it's like no one sees it. No one sees it until the end. And even then, you don't have time to read it because you need to vote on it.
Wait, what did he say? 4,000 pages?
Yeah, 4,135 pages is how long it is.
I mean, I consider myself a pretty fast reader, but how long do you think that would take you?
I think that would take you a couple of years to read. I mean, I just read a 600-page book, and it took me like a few weeks.
No, we went on vacation. We read Dune in a week. That's 650 pages.
Okay, I read Dune in a week. That was like 600
So
pages.
I would need a minimum of a month to get through that.
Like with no kids annoying you and asking for snacks and things like that, where you could literally just sit and read it.
Yeah.
Uninterrupted. Yeah, it would take you like a month.
Okay.
Right? I guess you have to eat. You have to go to the bathroom. It's ridiculous. Go ahead, Philip.
I was going to say, wasn't it several years back that they did something similar to this where they had this huge bill, everybody voted on it, and then they come to find out, like, because so much of it is just written by staffers, that there were, like, random things that were put in it by a staffer that, like, then they had to go back and amend out of the past bill because there was, like, a bunch of just random stuff that they'd put in. I can't remember the full story or what bill it was, but I remember that happening.
That's the Little Mermaid you're talking about. I'm just kidding.
No, you're right about that. They shoved stuff in there like, oh, that wasn't supposed to be in there because no one notices it's in there and it becomes law. But let me just go through this. So we've got a lot to get to here. So just so we're clear on this, this is Mitch McConnell, who the bill includes $45 billion for Ukraine. Leader Mitch McConnell says arming Ukraine is the #1 priority for Americans right now.
Making sure the Defense Department can deal with the major threats coming from Russia and China, providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the #1 priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see the challenges confronting the country at the moment.
Isn't it crazy? Like, you want to get them all on board with something, like they just bipartisan support, spend it on war, on fighting. And
that's how they're all united.
All in.
They're all in on this. But let me just ask all of our viewers right now, is the #1 priority for you sending weapons and money to Ukraine? Mitch McConnell, you heard Mitch McConnell just say that that's the #1 priority for most Americans right now, is the money flowing to Ukraine. So let me know in the chat room right now, yes or no. Vape King says, yeah, #1.
For me, I like sending money to Ukraine is far below like priority than, I don't know, like paying for school lunches and stuff, or healthcare for, it's like, that's so far down my list. It wouldn't even make my top 100.
I mean, they wouldn't even spend $5 billion on securing the border in the United States. $5 billion. No. Right? That's what, no, they won't do that. But they'll send $45 billion just in addition to the already $55 or $60 billion they've already sent. So on top of that, now we're pushing over towards $150 billion that we've sent to Ukraine. But it's your top priority. That's our top priority. Just so we're clear, Mitch McConnell says arming Ukraine is the #1 priority for Congress. And it's your #1 priority as an American. You care more about arming Ukraine than you do your own family. That's very patriotic of you. Congratulations. If $45 billion isn't enough for Ukraine in this budget, these members of Congress also snuck in, this is in the bill, a Ukrainian Independence Park in Washington, D.C. So yes, that's right. The next time you're in Washington, D.C., you can stop by Ukrainian Independence Park and, maybe have lunch. You can sit with your kids. And maybe you'll see civilians duct taped to telephone poles, just like in actual Ukraine. Mommy, you promised me we would see civilians duct taped to telephone poles. I saw that online where people pull down their pants and they smack them. I'm sorry, honey, you only get to see that in actual Ukraine.
That's the amusement park part of it.
Right. That's
you
the
pay
fun
extra.
Part. To get your ass smacked by a member of the Azov battalion.
I just did a poll in the chat, and we're pushing 2,000 votes. Is your #1 priority to send money to Ukraine? 97% no, 3% yes. So there is a 3% of the population that
is getting their way.
So I would love to know. Yeah, let us know in the chat if you're one of the 3%ers. Or if you're not a bot.
What I love about this Ukrainian Independence Park is that it's borrowed. It's mortgaged.
It's mortgaged money.
Yeah. We can't afford to do it. We like the idea of it, but we'll borrow money to do it.
So let's just be clear. We will take American-owned federal land, U.S.-owned federal land that you, the taxpayers, own, and we will rename it and call it Ukrainian Independence Park.
If only they had done this, in Vietnam, then Americans really would have got on board with that war a little bit more.
I'm going down to Vietnam Park this afternoon for some lunch. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have some pho.
Some Ho Chi Minh Park.
So next time you're in D.C., stop by Ukrainian Independence Park. Isn't Vietnam pho?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love pho.
You also know that you've not done enough for gender. The United States really is behind the 8 ball. They've not done enough for gender equity in the United States. We haven't done enough of it in the United States, but we also haven't done enough for gender equity in the country of Pakistan. This is included in the bill. Gender Equity Equality Action Fund, $200 million for Pakistan to make sure they have gender equity.
That's cool.
Laughably, the bill also includes billions of dollars in border security for other countries. Yes, you heard me right. Border security for other countries, including $410 million for border security in Middle Eastern countries, and $0 for the U.S. border security in the United States, additionally. So let's get this right. The United States invades Syria, invades Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, destabilizes the entire Middle East, pays then for their border security. I love how this works. You break it, I guess you have to pay for it. They're now throwing additional money at this. Here's a little reminder about
what I wonder?
Yeah.
Really quick, what I wonder is, do we, like, how much of this money that's allocated for that do we think actually goes to where they say? Like, if it leaves the United States, and at that point we know from past experience that there's no accounting for it. So it just leaves here, goes out of our pockets, and then where does it go? It's not going to these things.
Well, it's not coming out of our pockets because it's borrowed. So it's yeah.
But yeah, there's no auditing of this at all. Like, we don't know. Like, really, we're going to follow up and see, like, did the $200 billion go to the Pakistan Equity Fund and get, like, actually put in? No one's going to account for that. Someone's going to fly to Pakistan and check up on that? That's not going to happen. They're also not going to.
No, and they'd be conspiracy theorists if they tried or asked for it.
Yeah.
So if you need a reminder about America's border problem, here's new video from Rebel News overnight. This is El Paso, Texas. This is an airport in El Paso, Texas, being used to shelter thousands of illegal immigrants. So they don't have a border problem in El Paso. Watch. It's amazing, right? I mean, this is your airport in El Paso. So apparently we don't have a border problem in the United States of America, but we can send money.
We don't need any money for that.
We don't need any money for that. Yeah. So glad we're sending money to Ukraine and the Middle East to help with their border security, and so many stunningly stupid things in this bill. The omnibus spending bill includes $3 million for an LGBT museum in New York.
Okay.
We need that, an LGBT museum in New York. Democratic California Representative Zoe Lofgren earmarked $2 million in federal taxpayer money for the renovation and relocation of a Planned Parenthood clinic. $65 million.
I'm sorry, but how, okay, the LGBT museum, how is that not state fund things? Like, that should be on the state, not us, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much of this, it doesn't matter.
As a federal project.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So an LGBT museum in New York. But all of these things are coming out of the federal budget because you get bridges, and these senators earmark this stuff for their home states. And this is how this works, right? So you get $65 million for salmon populations, $3 million for bee-friendly highway projects.
Okay.
And plenty of money for abortions in this bill.
And also vasectomies.
Yeah. So Dan Bishop, Representative Dan Bishop, has some details on this. His thread is fantastic. He says, on a more sinister note, here's at least $575 million for family planning in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity. I want you to reread this. There's $575 million for family planning, meaning abortions, in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity. He says Malthusianism is disturbing an anti-human ideology that should have zero place in any federal program.
So if they can prove that the land you live on is being harmed by humans,
yes,
then they can sort of go in there and try and discourage people from having babies in those areas.
Or look towards Canada with the euthanasia programs that are in place in Canada, right? This is an opportunity to go into these towns and say, you have enough people living here, you're affecting the park. Maybe it's time you should, think about going down to the doctor and getting a pill, put yourself out of your misery.
Or it might be as simple as going in and making sure that population in that area is boosted, every 6 weeks.
Right. Yes, exactly. Could be.
Yeah.
So here is the Act 3 of it. Not less than $575 million should be made available for family planning, reproductive health, including in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity or endangered species. So if there's too many people living near bald eagles, go and get those eagles trimmed, if you know what I mean.
Population growth. Okay.
Go take care of those twig and berries.
That's disturbingly vague. I want to say, because humans are not parasitic by nature. They absolutely don't have to be.
But the money is funneling to Planned Parenthood clinics, and that's where the secret. So you're not allowed to do this in the budget, but it is, and so they've managed a way to do it to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in this bill. Which, if you the multiple pages of this in this bill, you can go through it if you want all 4,000 pages of it. Here's another one: $3 million for the Michelle Obama Nature Trail. Yeah, $3 million.
Really awesome.
How natural is that if it costs $3 million to build it?
You were hoping on that one?
Yeah. That and the salmon were my two big ones that I was like, please. Oh, and also Smokey the Bear. Like the last bill gave you the ability to pay him smoking a cigarette. I was hoping that they would increase to maybe smoking a joint. Because, we're past legalization of marijuana by now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So $3.6 million for the Michelle Obama Nature Trail. You can go on a hike there. $2 million for a Nancy Pelosi fellowship program. So that we need that. So she put this in the bill. So that's a $2 million for the Nancy Pelosi fellowship program. She's also getting her own.
Can we define that, please?
I don't know.
What is that?
It's like, I don't know, giving grants and stuff to people.
Well, a fellowship is, I had one. It's a study program where, they pay your tuition and get you a research ship.
So Pelosi is also getting a federal building with her name on it at the cost of $65 million for both her and Senator Patrick Leahy. So they'll each have their own federal buildings. The Speaker Nancy Pelosi Federal Building in San Francisco on 90th and 7th Street in San Francisco. I'm sure there'll be plenty of homeless people sleeping on the doorstep.
There's no 90th Street.
Wait a minute.
97th. 97th
well, whatever.
Street.
Gets voted out. If she's getting voted out, who gets that building when she leaves?
We gotta honor her. She's the greatest Speaker of the House in world history. So we've got to honor her with a federal building where people can do drugs on the front steps. $335 million to prepare for here's what I want you to really pay attention to this, for influenza pandemic. Oh, wait a minute. We're going to have an influenza pandemic? $335 million for an influenza pandemic. That's interesting. Including, see that there and highlighted in blue? Surveillance tools. Oh, okay, we're just going to throw in some money for surveillance of the American populace. And this part I found very interesting. The government is now adding hundreds of billions of dollars to the budget for what they're calling vaccine injuries. That's interesting. The Vaccine Injury Compensation Program Trust Fund. And they're increasing this tremendously by millions. You want to tell us something that we should know about, perhaps? Probably not. Keep quiet about that. You're not allowed to talk about that. But I'm glad you're throwing a lot more money at this. We might need it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Know what I mean? Know what I mean?
And it says for vaccines issued after September 30th, 1988.
Yeah, they put the date back nicely.
So that's very broad.
So they were like, March 2021. Like they were like, we're going to go back into the 80s. That way no one will ask us any questions. So Senator Rand Paul has a few more ridiculous items on the list. Watch.
How does Congress spend taxpayers' money? Well, here's just a few examples of how your government currently spends money. We found that they spent last year $2.3 million injecting beagles with cocaine. It seems that they were curious, their researchers were curious, despite the pain they inflicted on these dogs, they were curious to know if cocaine causes adverse effects. Guess what? Read the newspaper. Read the news. Look at the addicts across our country. You think you need to inject beagles with cocaine to know that cocaine's a bad deal? $700,000 was spent to study how male parrots attract their mate. Really? We've got people who go hungry in our country. We got people that are trying to get out from behind poverty, and we're spending $700,000 studying how male parrots attract a female.
And the list goes on. I mean, the United States is facing a massive recession with companies about to proceed with huge layoffs. Peter Schiff says these layoffs are going to be huge because the companies want to avoid bankruptcy. So they're going to be laying off so many people. He also says so many Americans are taking 2 and 3 jobs right now just to make ends meet. Well, listen.
The savings rate is at the lowest it's been since 2007. I think it's down to 2.3%. So Americans have blown through all their stimulus money, and now they're pretty much broke. If you look at credit card debt, it's at an all-time record high. So Americans are struggling to put food on the table and to pay the electric bill, and so they're borrowing more money on their credit cards. If you look at what's happening to wages, they are declining in real terms. And I think the real decline is being masked by the fact that we are understating inflation. I think the actual inflation rate is about double what the government will admit to. And that means that the real decline in wages is much greater, which explains why so many people are now moonlighting. A record number of Americans have 2 and 3 jobs. In fact, you have more Americans than ever that are working 2 full-time jobs. Most people don't want multiple jobs. They would prefer to be able to support themselves and their family on 1 job. But unfortunately, in the Biden economy, that's not possible. And that's where all these jobs that are being created are going. They're going to people who don't want more jobs, but who are forced to take them anyway, because that's the only way that they can keep up with the rising cost of living.
That's
so.
Man, what the hell is he talking about? That is, George Bush said that is America. Having 3 jobs, that is America. Isn't that America? Having 3 jobs?
I saw someone in our chat room just said, yeah, I have 3 jobs. Like 3 jobs just to make ends meet right now, because these idiots put us into this man-made crisis, and they continue to spend money that they don't have and borrow against our future for doing salmon tests and bee highways and injecting beagles with cocaine.
And a lot of the talking points around government spending as it relates to inflation have sort of all but gone away. The White House doesn't have to be embarrassed about it any longer, because the Federal Reserve has been being good boys and increasing interest rates and saying, see, we're okay, we're combating it. So then when it comes time to pass a spending bill, they don't have to answer for it anymore for some reason, and nobody's holding their feet to the fire.
Yeah, the only person, you have a few people.
Why would they have to do that with beagles when they already had the data they could have taken from Pablo Escobar, that bear that downed that bag of cocaine?
The cocaine bear.
That's a good enough story. Like, just take the data from that. Yep, it affects animals. Next.
It's unbelievable. I mean, anyway.
Well, I thought it was interesting in that Peter Schiff bit, that he used the phrase, like, now that people have blown through their stimulus money. Like, who had that money that needed it, that had it for more than, like, 2 months max? I mean, come on, like, blew through that money. Like, there was barely any.
There was barely any, and then people that put it in savings, because we saw like record savings at that time, then they put it in savings, and then they blew through that. If they had it in savings for like a few months, now the energy bills have gone up 30%. The rent has gone up tremendously. We are watching
food costs.
I mean, this country is collapsing.
Still owes everybody $1,200, right? Doesn't Biden still owe us all $1,200 or something?
I think he was supposed to, yeah. Where are they going to print that? Borrow more from China. Borrow more from China. Well, we've got more news to get to here on the show. We're going to talk about Ukraine in a few minutes here, because Zelensky just met with President Biden, and what they said and talked about was pretty damn fascinating. And what they're asking, what he's about to address Congress and ask for more money. And we'll tell you about the status of Ukraine this afternoon, because they are without power and they are in a total tailspin right now. So we'll get there. We're also going to talk about CNN taking a bow, getting the applause lines from the Pentagon, all of that and more coming up. But we are heading for a devastating economic collapse in the next few months. All the signs are pointing to a January, February, massive amounts of layoffs for companies, as Peter Schiff was just talking about. You have Goldman Sachs over the past 48 hours issuing a dire warning. You know it's bad when the banks are saying, like, hey, we have to lay people off. The banks? Really? They're sounding the alarm? Shit's about to hit the fan. Jerome Powell raising interest rates again. So I hope you're protecting your family and really, really making sure that you're protecting against what is coming for the U.S. dollar, the U.S. dollar's decline. If you're not, then you need to think about things like gold and silver and making sure that your family is protected. Did you know that you can actually add physical gold and actually physical silver to your IRA, your self-directed retirement account? It's one of the most powerful wealth building tools. Natalie and I have a self-directed IRA. I'm not talking about the IRA you get through like a Fidelity. I'm talking about it's self-directed. You control it. No bank controls it and makes money off of you. You control it. You can invest in stocks if you want to, gold, silver. You can buy real estate with it. There's only like a few things you can't do. You can't buy like collectibles, and you can't lend money to a family member. There's very few restrictions. right? So you can't go out and buy comic books and put it in your IRA, but you can invest in gold and silver and things that will grow and are a hedge against inflation. So the way that you can do this is with our friends at Lear Capital. So they have a gold report. You can call them. You can learn more about how you can actually put physical gold into your retirement account. The phone number is on your screen. Just give them a call. It's 1-800-613-3557. That's their 800 number. Lear Capital is the gold standard in precious metals investing, has over $3 billion in trusted transactions, 650,000 happy customers. And right now, they're offering free shipping on every purchase of gold or silver coins and up to $15,000 in free bonus silver to every qualified client. So giving away $15,000 in free silver to every qualified client. So just call them, see if it works out for you. You can also check their website as well. We have that on our screen as well. It's Redacted.com. Redacted.com. Check them out today. So thank you everyone for subscribing to the channel. If you do, oh, Santa just went by. Santa just flew by here over
training runs.
Yes, in Porto, in Portugal. If you subscribe, your name will pop up here on the big screen. So please hit that subscribe button, and we'd like to welcome a new rebel. Let's see if we can get one as I'm pointing to the screen. Anybody want to subscribe who hasn't already subscribed? And go. Subscribe. And subscribe. And...
Well, Santa's there.
Well, Santa's there.
He's subscribed.
Well,
the show's not going on until someone subscribes. So if you guys want the show to continue, I'm just going to say, if you don't subscribe, it's not going to happen. We'll just sit here.
I hope there's not a problem with this. Because last week there was one day where it wasn't updating. So we're like, did no one subscribe during the show? And like, it was because the machine wasn't updated.
Hurt our feelings.
So yeah, this is not normal. Normally it would happen every few seconds. Maybe we suck today. I hope not. All right, we've got more news to get to, and let's do it. Let's talk about this. So we've been tracking the sudden spike of excess deaths this year around the world. We've been covering this story for a long time now. Why are country after country experiencing sudden, unexpected deaths? Question. I'll throw it out to you. You let me know your thoughts on this. Well, now we can add Germany to this list. Germany.
Should we define excess deaths?
Okay,
because we're not talking about deaths that are happening given, related to any given thing. The government sort of tracks normal death rates, birth and death rates around normal events, such as normally you get babies born in September because people conceive those babies around the holidays, that kind of thing. You get more drunk driving accidents around certain times of the month, for instance. And so the algorithm will give you a national average. And in most countries, we are seeing that average spike in recent months. Yeah, recent months. So it's all across the board right now. So now we can add Germany to this list. Germany, excess deaths up 19%, according to the most recent data. Vice President, parliamentary vice president, calling for an investigation now into deaths and damages after the pathologists who examined these bodies at autopsy all said, hey, 30% of them all had one thing in common. He's saying that. He's a doctor. He's a pathologist in Germany. They're calling for a parliamentary investigation. Watch this German news report.
Gründen der deutlichen Übersterblichkeit und auch Bundestagsvize Wolfgang Kubicki will es jetzt wissen. Im Interview mit der Welt fordert er jetzt eine Obduktion und Überprüfung von Todesfällen nach der Corona-Impfung. Kubicki bezieht sich dabei auf eine Studie von Heidelberger Pathologen Peter Schirmacher, der herausgefunden hatte, dass bei 30% aller von ihm untersuchten Fälle die Impfung die Todesursache gewesen sei.
So that's what the pathologist is saying. He's a doctor.
And he's saying this based on observation and asking for examination.
He's seeing this in the autopsies.
And asking for investigations.
Yeah. So we're seeing this across the board now. We should probably maybe look into this and have an actual investigation. Be allowed to freaking talk about it. Censorship, baby. Not allowed to talk about it. Do a Google search. Go to Yahoo News. Try to do searches. You can't find it. It's suppressed. That's why. German badass Christine Anderson wants answers for her country and Europe and the world. She's a member of European Parliament from Germany. She asks this question.
When these vaccines became available,
We were promised it would prevent contraction and transmission of COVID-19. All governments around the world, EU Commission, everyone, basically repeated that, began harassing and intimidating people so they would take that promised game changer. Well, it turns out it was fake news, wasn't it? Somebody lied, and I want to know who lied.
Well, why are we just hearing about this? Why are we just hearing about this?
Can I say really quick that I just want to give kudos to Twitter, because I'm seeing this information now on Twitter, and they have like released all the guidelines on COVID. So it's like now I'm getting information that I had to go elsewhere to try to find on Twitter. So kudos to that. At least the conversation is happening there.
And things are being allowed to trend, which weren't allowed before. Hashtags around questioning the vaccination program. So yes, this is, I mean, it's very interesting to see certain trends that were obviously suppressed before.
Yeah, and certain trends that were being amplified. Like we learned this afternoon, war in Ukraine war was being amplified because of the pro-Ukrainian Twitter army working at Twitter. So certain things were being amplified. And yes, we know what certain things were being suppressed. So why, again, why are we just hearing about this? Well, it's been suppressed, specifically on YouTube. Watch Dr. John Campbell get all tongue-tied, not being able to talk about this. And he shows us, over the past few days, YouTube's guidelines. And I love that he wrote them in Comic Sans font. Watch this.
So, serious underreporting. Now, Google YouTube guidelines, just so you know, a reminder of what's going on here. Now, these haven't changed. And the YouTube guideline here, written in Comic Sans script, claims that an approved COVID-19 vaccine will cause death, infertility, miscarriage, autism, or contraction of another infectious disease. I'm not allowed to say any of those, so I'm going to stop reporting on that particular paper at this point, because I have to follow YouTube guidelines.
So isn't that amazing? Like what I love is that he does that. He puts up Comic Sans, to make a point. It's like, I'm not going to talk about it, but you know what's going on.
So now is a peer-reviewed paper, and I have to stop talking about academics.
Here's a peer-reviewed scientific paper that he's reporting on, and I can't talk about it because their guidelines won't let us talk about it.
And he's not just a YouTuber. This guy is a guy that has the credentials to be able to talk about it.
He is a medical professional.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
And so I would love to know, like, who on YouTube's staff is a medical professional? Like, do you have like a team of doctors?
No, YouTube has always just sort of deferred to the CDC. Whatever the CDC says, you can't violate, you can't speak against.
Or the WHO. Yeah. So you can't go again.
Oh, so that means we should be able to talk about the thing on that Died Suddenly documentary then now, right?
I don't know.
No, because they haven't updated. So yes, even though the CDC and the WHO have now pointed out things on their websites, YouTube's still not caught up. So you just got to get, it's like a slow, they're like really slow on this, unfortunately.
It's like waiting for iOS 16. It's like they're still in beta or whatever.
Yeah.
Waiting for the actual release.
So Germany is not alone in these huge spikes in excess deaths. Why are we just hearing about this? I'll ask that question again. Well, according to news reports from U.S. doctors, we're also learning that Dr. Fauci told coroners in the United States not to carry out autopsies. This is Dr. Ryan Cole, who admitted that Fauci was telling doctors, sorry, not necessary, don't do autopsies. Watch.
So what's happened to the autopsy, Ryan?
Well, Anthony Fauci told our government to tell people don't do autopsies on COVID patients. You cannot find that for which you do not look. I have a post-vaccine.
So,
wow.
Yeah, and I uploaded a separate video that I had beeped. I don't know why that's not there. I made specifically, I even added beeps and everything today on it. But
that was the one. Remember I told you at the last minute I grabbed one and because it was all squashed and weird looking. So it must not have carried through the beep.
Okay. What?
Well, he didn't say
No, I cut him off.
Yeah.
So I beeped out. So anyway, but I wish I had that video now. Do you have it that you can play it even though it's squished? We can fix it later in post.
Give me a second.
Because I specifically spent like a half an hour adding in beeps because to take out key moments of this, but this is a key moment here. So Dr. Cole, I'll give you kind of a little rundown here. He's explaining the people that he's now seeing in his practice. He's a coroner, so these are people who are not talking anymore, who he's talking to or he's dealing with. These people all had something in common. And he's saying we were told not to be able to talk about this and not even perform.
Does he have any proof of that? Does he talk about
proof of what? The autopsies?
No, how Fauci sent this mandate to not.
I'm sure he does. Yeah, I haven't asked him specifically. I've invited him on the show.
Okay.
But I'd love to know specifically how these coroners, because I've heard this now from multiple different sources on coroners who have not been performing. We have other sources here we're going to show you in just a second. But so we have the squished version of this now.
And I was just going to say real quick, I don't think like a guy like that, you have to understand, like if you're speaking to power that can destroy your reputation, you better have your ducks in a row. And I'm sure he knew that. And so he wouldn't be saying that, I don't think, otherwise, unless he had proof, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. I just that's a big claim, and it's an important part of this, and I would like to see.
Yeah. So here is Dr. Ryan Cole again saying this, and by the way, we've also heard the same in Canada. We've also heard the same in Canada from medical professionals in Canada who have been saying that they've been asked not to. So this carries over. This is not just Fauci. Or it's bigger than that. But listen to Dr. Cole beeped out this time with a little squished video here. We apologize.
So what's happened to the autopsy, Ryan?
Well, Anthony Fauci told our government to tell people don't do autopsies on COVID patients. You cannot find that for which you do not look. I have a post 9-year-old on my desk, dead. I don't want to see one more child post ever on my desk. Are the autopsies starting to happen? You bet they are, finally, because people are saying, well, why wouldn't we do them? And in that same town from which this 9-year-old died, a healthy 22-year-old wrestler, after his third is now also coming to be on my desk so I can determine the cause of death there. We're told don't do autopsies, don't look, and that's what your government is giving you for data. Don't ask, don't tell, don't look.
And it's so interesting, the type of data that we are allowed to talk about and the type of data that the media picks up on, because I'm watching headlines all day. So these 2 studies that the CDC put out this week that showed some kind of statistical advantage of vaccination was very slight, and it was more like, it was about statistics. It was not about trials. So the actual data they don't want, but if they can manipulate statistics, they want it. In order to feed into a pre-existing narrative.
Just like the New York Times piece from a few weeks ago that came out that it was total. It's been debunked now. They literally read the study wrong and wrote an article in reverse. It's been debunked now by multiple doctors. Like, no, you literally read the study wrong. What the study is telling you is the exact opposite of what the story you wrote. And then that went out to millions of people.
That happens more than you think, because I spend my time watching headlines, clicking through to the source and saying, that's not at all what this says.
So good luck getting autopsies. County coroners have been refusing to carry out autopsies on these sudden deaths among children. If you're a parent whose 7-year-old just dropped dead, and the only thing out of the ordinary is that they went and got something done recently, you'd want to know what's going on. Like in Vegas, this family, child's unexplained death and the refusal for an autopsy. This father who, his 7-year-old daughter, Brianna, suddenly died in Las Vegas, and the county coroner refused to do an autopsy. Listen to this father, heartbreaking, standing on her grave.
And she just was an amazing little girl. She was full of life. She smiled all the time. I dropped her off to school on February 16th, I believe. She had a stomach ache, and 2 days later, she passed away in the hospital. Clark County Coroner's Office, they refused to do an autopsy on her, so we don't know what's going on. It's been 2 years. I don't see how they wouldn't have wanted to know what happened to a 7-year-old little girl.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking. We don't want to know. We don't want to know. So,
all right. Well, another study out of the Cleveland Clinic shows that some interesting data about your risk of contracting COVID. It does not tell us much about hospitalization or death or even severe COVID. The reason for that is because in this study of 51,000 people, no one had severe COVID, even the people who contracted it. So this study, again, it's a statistical analysis of actual people who had COVID or who had the vaccine. It's not a human trial, but it's an interesting one. It says, and I'm quoting from the Cleveland Clinic, that doesn't come out so easily. The higher the number of vaccines previously received, the higher the risk of contracting COVID-19. Further, the study found that the current bivalent vaccines were about 30% effective overall in protecting against infection of COVID when the Omicron BA4, BA5 lineages were the predominant circulating strains. Now take a look at their chart. So what you see here, I'm going to explain these lines, is that people who had no dose are black, the black line. The people who had 1 dose, this is the red line here. People who had 2 is the green. People who had 3 is blue. And then more than 3 doses is orange. Well, that's in order, you guys. If you look at, and this is a timeline, days since the study started. And then the axis on the left is who got COVID. Well, you can see that it's the orange line that is more likely to actually contract COVID than the people who have had no vaccinations at all, which is not what researchers expected to find. The researchers concede that this is not at all the only one to indicate that risk of infection may actually go up with more vaccinations. Now, we've had doctors warn us, you can just deplete your immune system if you keep going with this vaccine. But now we have the data to prove it. This has also been observed. I don't want to use the word prove, but we have observed this now. This has also been observed in studies in Germany, Israel, and the UK. Now, one explanation that the authors say is that maybe those who received more doses were more likely to be individuals at higher risk for COVID. So that's possible, but a small portion of individuals may have fit this description, they said, but when they actually dug into the data, they saw the majority of subjects in this study were generally young individuals. All were eligible to have received at least 3 doses of the vaccine by the study start date. Now, again, they could not infer anything about the vaccine preventing severe COVID because in this study of 51,000 people, there were too few severe illnesses for the study to be able to determine if the vaccine decreased severity of illness, which contradicts what we are being told, that you should get this vaccine to prevent severe COVID or hospitalization. But if those cases are so rare, how do we know this? The authors are saying we clearly need more studies about this because it does seem to show what we've been warned about increasing numbers of vaccinations. Again, it seems to be crickets about this on the mainstream media, though.
Yeah, and the latest data on excess deaths, if you want to take my laptop screen here. So these are the latest data points for countries around the world. So New Zealand, Norway, Poland are here at the top. You can see all the different countries on the list here that provide these data points. And on the left-hand column is the week, right? The week of the year. So we're approaching, getting the, and by the way, we only have data up until the 40th week. So we're still waiting on data from the last few weeks, but it's all trending upward from a number of these countries. I mean, all across the board. So you can see 12% increase here. And this is the column you want to look at, excess death percentage, which is a change from the average. So let's just take a look, go down the line here at Belgium. 12% increase, right? 23% increase here for Austria, 23% increase. Look at these last few weeks here of these particular months through November, right? Denmark up from average, 17% increase, excess deaths. Just go here, all the United States all the way here at the end, 13% increase. United Kingdom, 17% increase. The list goes on and on for these increases across the board for a lot of these countries. Slovenia, Portugal, 11% increase in Portugal from 10, 12, 16, 15, 2.5, and 11%. So, you can seek this data out yourself, and you can look at these and wait for the specific country data points for these excess deaths. But why are we not investigating this? Why is there not an international outcry? And only a few voices in the European Parliament and the United Kingdom in front of their parliament, and a few voices in the United States holding Senate hearings. That's it. Nothing. No outrage, no discussion about it.
And any of them that do stand up in their parliament or in these other countries, they're marginalized. They're like, oh, listen to crazy old Claire, now I can't remember her, Daly, going on again about this crazy conspiracy stuff. And they're just like laughing at him and everything. So it's like, they do run the risk of damaging their careers, but these people don't care. And the thing is, if you go back and listen to them and lay it on the timeline and lay it on the actual data that people have been putting out there, they've been right the whole time. And that's very unfortunate.
Yeah, really sad. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. Thank you for your super chats. I really appreciate it. Thank you for subscribing here. We got a new Rebel VIP, Seth McIntyre. Thank you for becoming a Rebel and joining the rebellion. We really appreciate it.
And another one, Blessing McCabe. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your super chat as well. All right, we've got more news to get to here on this Wednesday edition. We're going to talk about the slave reparations. Should we be paying reparations 160 years after the fact? Does that make any sense? Well, we'll tell you where that's happening. We're also going to look at Ukraine, because President Zelensky of Ukraine in the United States, in front of Congress, demanding more money, asking for more incentives, more weapons, more money, meeting with the President of the United States moments ago. We'll bring you that story and the updates on his demands and what's happening in Ukraine. Plus CNN, we're going to talk about a big au revoir from the Pentagon for CNN. You won't want to miss that story.
All right. But first, I want to talk to you about our friends over at HelloFresh. Now, maybe you're like me. If you are preparing for the holidays, your refrigerator has only holiday food, and then you're kind of stuck for the rest of the week and you have nothing to feed your family. Raise your hand if you've done that, where you've got just a turkey and mashed potatoes and all of that stuff, and then you're like, but what about the days before and after that? That is a pain in the butt. That's why you can find some calendar saving tips and also some help from HelloFresh, because you can continue to focus on just the holiday meal, and then they can help you with weekday meals that go before and after that. Look for HelloFresh's quick and easy options like 20-minute meals, because if you're going to be cooking a holiday meal, you don't need to be spending extra time on just weeknight dinners. And easy cleanup dishes, I like that. Big on flavor and easy on effort. These time-saving solutions mean more time with family and friends around the holidays. As your calendar starts to fill up this season, you can count on HelloFresh to get you some of your free time back by making cooking simple and quick. They have each recipe and pre-portioned ingredients coming right to your door, so you can skip the grocery store and all of that prep. And if you're looking for variety, with over 35 recipes available to choose from each week, there's something to please everyone. Just choose from family-friendly or fit and wholesome, veggie. Plus, you can easily customize your meal by swapping proteins or sides, or upgrading your proteins, or even adding protein to a veggie meal if you'd like. So let me tell you exactly how to go to, there it is, HelloFresh.com Redacted. Are we missing the slash? We must be there. HelloFresh.com/redacted, because you can't put redacted.
Redacted 18. Let me read it.
Okay, you read that part.
HelloFresh.com/redacted18 is the way to get those 18 free meals plus free shipping. Again, it's HelloFresh.com/redacted18 is how you get that. There you go. There's the slash.
Thank you so much. Okay. We wouldn't want you to miss out on those 18 free meals, so that your holidays don't look like ours usually do, which is a nice holiday meal and then nobody eats anything but snacks because no one really wants stuffing leftovers. Why does no one want stuffing and leftovers?
I don't know. I love it. Dan Clark says, just cooked a deboned turkey today and fed 4 of my neighbors in our elderly community on Rumble. That's so nice of you.
Huh.
So, but yes, that's absolutely true.
You do not eat the stuffing.
I like the stuffing. I love the, when we have, because I like to repeat the Thanksgiving dinner, the Christmas dinner, like again. I like having I'll do like a night again of it, like turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes. But then you're right, then your fridge is empty and oh crap, we don't have anything.
Yeah, I have tried drop an egg in the middle of stuffing, like a stuffing bake. That's okay. I saw it online. I was like, maybe I'll try that.
You saw it on TikTok.
Like drop an egg.
So
what do you mean, like just like
a fried egg,
So you take like a ramekin, fill it with stuffing, make a little hole, and then drop crack an egg inside, and then put it in the oven and have like an egg bake stuffing. I don't know. What do you guys think? Thumbs up to that idea or thumbs down? It didn't come out.
Maybe if it was like fully mixed
I would just make the egg.
Yeah, I was just trying to use up the stuffing.
Yeah,
and that wasn't awesome. And a lot of times I like leftovers, but no one else does. So you need a different meal for the rest of the holidays. And I always feel super resentful of that. Like, why do I have to cook anything else? So I'm not cooking a damn thing until New Year's. So this is super helpful.
All right.
Okay.
Also, before we move on to the next story, I just want to say we're getting a lot of comments in the chat, and I agree. Candace Cameron would be jealous today. Your hair is on fire today.
Oh,
everybody.
Thank you. It's got a lot of body today. Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's got a lot of body.
That's nice of you to say. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that came out as a compliment.
I saw someone in the chat call me Morticia, and I'll take it.
Morticia.
Sure.
Edith, or no, what was her name? Lilith from.
That's when I wear a bun. I get Lilith.
From Frasier.
From Frasier. Cheers. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take pretty much anything you can throw at me. I don't get too much.
I'll give it a try.
But I appreciate the comments on my hair.
All right.
Okay. Well, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, issued a formal apology for his country's role in the slave trade on Monday. In a slave trade. I don't want to say the slave trade because humanity has had many over many centuries. So this brings up the question that I would like to talk about is, should the West be making apologies and reparations for slave trade, especially for people who don't own slaves, have never had anything to do with it? This is a nice time to talk about this. Slavery is unequivocally a bad thing. My concern here, though, is about pretending that it was the invention of Westerners and making Westerners pay for it, because it seems to be this sort of religious-like revival that anyone who's not a descendant of a slave needs to mea culpa for their race. And I'm concerned about it because I think it ignores the concerns of actual slaves today that there are. And also it ignores a lot of history. Slavery existed in biblical times. It wasn't even new then. The Mongols enslaved, the Turks enslaved. White people did not invent slavery or even the slave trade. African nations where slaves were pulled from during the Dutch slave trade were complicit in selling those slaves. In many cases, people were sold from African nations by Africans for items as basic as such as gin and mirrors, according to Candace Owen in her book about this, her specific part about reparations. She points out that the only places where slavery exists today are in non-white nations. So is this an attempt to turn our heads away from actual slavery by asking people to apologize for it, so we don't see where it's actually happening? In Africa today, there are child soldiers, human trafficking, forced labor.
It's happening at our border in the United States.
Yes.
As we speak, it's happening right now.
Yes. So is that maybe more important than a mea culpa from 160 years ago? Further, the slave trade that we're talking about, that the Dutch are apologizing for, did not only go west, it went east too. This is from Douglas Murray's book, War on the West. He says the best figures available, proposed by scholars such as Professor Ralph Austin of the University of Chicago, is that somewhere between 11 and 17 million Africans were traded east in the Arab-run slave trade. One reason why these numbers are so difficult to discern is that unlike transatlantic trade, the slaves the Arabs traded were systematically castrated after being brought from Africa, which of course ensured that there was neither a second generation of slaves nor any descendants. So, you know, again, we have to look in both directions here if we want to really make any apologize. And, you know, 15, what is the number? 11 to 17 million. The Dutch prime minister this week was apologizing for 600,000 slaves. Watch.
Tot 1814 werden ruim 600.000 tot slaafgemaakte Afrikaanse vrouwen, mannen en kinderen onder erbarmelijke omstandigheden naar het Amerikaanse continent verscheept door Nederlandse slaafhandelaren.
By Dutch slave traders.
So we're missing the story here of millions more by many magnitudes if we focus on the West. Is that helpful in what I think is our collective goal of preventing slavery and promoting unity? The Netherlands enslaved nearly 160 years ago. The prime minister's speech was 20 minutes at the National Archives. And instead of reparations, he says he's establishing a 200 million euro fund to help tackle the legacy of slavery in the Netherlands and its former colonies to boost education about the issue. So there will be money there.
Great.
And it's specifically around let's combat racism that's still around. Let's combat disadvantages. But a lot of black leaders are saying that's not enough. We actually want the money to people. One black leader of a black activist group did not attend the speech due to the lack of direct payments to descendants. And so he called this speech insulting, which raises an important question. And I want to ask it sensitively, but I think we should talk about it. No one alive today participated in the Dutch slave trade. So should current taxpayers bear this burden? The way this is argued in woke universities, and I come from them, so I know, is that the slave trade held back generations of wealth, like when you play a monopoly board. So one group has been playing for generations, buying up properties, collecting go, going past go and collecting 200, collect go. You pass go and you collect $200. Right. And they've been building up wealth, and one group has not been able to play. So how can that group catch up? The problem with this analogy that I have repeated before myself is that most generational wealth does not pass down. You and I both know this from our financial education. This is the problem with wealthy parents, either that or lack of a financial education.
Famously, the Vanderbilts.
Yes, I'm going to get to the Vanderbilts, is that most families don't figure out how to teach their children how to build or maintain wealth. That's true. It's statistically true. For more on this, absolutely, I suggest a book by Andrew Howell and David York called Entrusted, Building a Legacy That Lasts, where he talks about generational wealth. And so while slavery by the West unequivocally held one group back from obtaining wealth, most generational wealth does not pass down more than 1 to 2 generations. In fact, you're right, the Vanderbilts were poor within 2 generations of the peak of their wealth.
Right. So the idea that, all of these generations have just built up such incredible capital that no one can possibly catch up to them, because every family just hands down wealth. They just hand down all of this money. They do 1031 exchange programs, and then they hand it down where they don't pay taxes on a death tax, and these families are just living in palatial mansions, and that's not happening at all.
Yes.
Very, very, very small number. I mean, we talk about 1%. No. It's like 0.01%. That is where that's happening. The Kennedys, for instance. Like, you can name these families like on one hand, really.
Yes. So that again brings up the idea of money. We just talked about the stimulus, the COVID stimulus, how most of that money, those direct payments, has already come and gone. And so are we really thinking that there will ever be a money amount? Now, I have read, I can't remember the author's name, who talked about England's war on India, who said that reparations should be $1 or £1, so that at least the Crown and the British government, admits they did wrong, sends £1 to India so it doesn't impact current taxpayers. That's an idea. I'm not sure.
It's just like symbolic.
It's symbolic, right?
And put up a monument, you know?
I think most people would find that more upsetting.
And by the way, in the Netherlands, they already have a big monument of the slave trade. I mean, they have a huge monument with chains and statues and everything else. So they already have it. What about this money, $160 million for all of the farmers who you're now putting out of business and you know, destroying your country and you're setting your country back hundreds of years? You're literally taking the Netherlands and sending it back 100 years by what you're now doing to the farmers.
Yes. So, you know, I see a super chat here that says, let's be real, this money is owed. But by who is an important question, and to who is an important question. You know, someone like me, my descendants, I come from people who worked in plantations in Puerto Rico and Hawaii. But you know, I'm half European and then half these. So would it be me because I also come from, you know, a slave labor group. I don't know. Go ahead, David. What are you going to say?
I was just going to say, I saw somebody talking about this on Facebook, and I was like, how do you even track that? How do you even start to come up with a way to make that? Like, we can't even balance our budget in this country, and yet we're going to do something like that. And it's like, do you have, like, what about slave owners that had children with their slaves? Like, do they get a lesser percent? Like, how do you even go back and do that? And another thing, John Legend, who is a singer-songwriter, pointed out, we have more black people incarcerated for non-violent offenses in this country right now than there were slaves in slave times.
Wow.
So I think we need to deal with the current slave problem before we move on to think about reparation.
Oh, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Now, here's a quote from the Associated Press of someone who was a descendant of slaves saying, it's about money. Apologies are words, and with those words, you can't buy anything. So I come back to this question. If generational wealth does not pass down, is it really about money? Because it won't fix your children's lives. So then what? You know, or is this just some sort of like transfer of wealth and power that we want to see as a plenary moment for the West? Here's what I think is the biggest existential issue with this. And I want to raise this with all sincerity and not lead you by how I ask it. So I'm going to try and ask it without any nuance. What the Dutch Prime Minister says is that slavery is doing harm to people even today. Watch.
Wij, levend in het hier en nu, kunnen slavernij alleen in de allerduidelijkste bewoordingen erkennen en veroordelen als misdaad tegen de menselijkheid. Als een misdadig systeem dat wereldwijd onnoemelijk veel mensen, onnoemelijk veel en groot leed heeft gebracht. En dat doorwerkt in de levens van mensen hier en nu.
Okay.
Do you want to sum up what he said for people?
So he says that suffering still exists today because of slavery. Now, we've talked about how you quantify that. How do you quantify how it exists today? But here's my bigger question. Whose is it to forgive? Is it mine to forgive the pain of my ancestors any more than it is mine to pay for the sins of my ancestors? Here's an anecdote that I'll leave you with, again, from Douglas Murray's book. In 1969, a man named Simon Wiesenthal published a book about his experience as a Holocaust survivor. When he was in the Lemberg concentration camp, at one point he was pulled from the line and taken to the bedside of a dying Nazi. The man confessed to having participated in untold atrocities. He had, for instance, set a house on fire with hundreds of Jewish people inside, and he and his colleagues had shot them as they tried to escape. More awful, awful crimes against humanity. The man, the Nazi, who is called Karl S. in this book, brought Wiesenthal to his bedside as a sort of deathbed confession, and here's how Murray tells it. He says, what happens next after this deathbed confession of awful atrocity? is what makes Weisenthal's book so memorable. For after the SS soldier had finished his tale and the reader perhaps expects some sort of reconciliation, Weisenthal gets up and leaves the room without saying a word. Later, Weisenthal meditates on whether he did the right thing, and the second half of the book is given over to a symposium involving a range of thinkers and religious leaders who contribute their thoughts on the events that Weisenthal described. It's notable, incidentally, that many of the Christians who contributed to this symposium believe that Weisenthal should have offered some kind of forgiveness to the soldier. But the broader consensus that emerges from the contributors is that Weisenthal did the right thing. And if there is a reason that it comes down to this, that Weisenthal, although he was a Jew, like the soldier's victims, had neither the right nor the ability to forgive the soldier for what he had done. In order for true forgiveness to occur, the parties involved must not be the only one who has done the wrong, but the one to whom the wrong was done. So again, here's the question. Whose is it to forgive? If you receive a paycheck, does that, or a racism program or anything like that, is that yours? Does that make it right? You know, again, I don't want to lead you to a conclusion. I just ask in earnest, because these reparations discussions, my fear is, do not include all guilty parties. We've established that. Do not do anything about slavery currently happening. Do not guarantee generational wealth, because pretty much nothing does. And it leads to an attitude that people alive today have anything to do with this. And it creates rituals of forgiveness that are disproportionate. So I leave it to you to say, do you think that someone accepting money or a program can actually forgive the sins of somebody else on behalf of somebody else? And we welcome your thoughts.
Interesting story. A lot of good questions, a lot of good comments here.
What do you think of the Weisenthal book?
Well, I mean, having read his in a history of the Holocaust class, I mean, it's not an easy answer. But, I was thinking about that today, actually, because today we got word out of Germany. There's a 98-year-old woman. She was a secretary. She was a juvenile. She was a secretary at a concentration camp. And she was just sentenced today. She's 98 years old. Basically has to pay like two years of like house arrest or something, like 2 years of like nothing. And they tried her as a juvenile because it happened while she was like 14 or 15 years old. So she's 98 years old. And there's like lots of questions about what she knew or whatever. But it's like, you think about this now, it's like, it's still in many ways, it's like for a lot of people, it's it's still like a fresh wound, right? But for 160 years ago, for people who are not alive, for people who I'm going to pay out from my family.
Yes. Because
of something, I don't know, 4 or 5 generations ago did, like, and now it makes no sense. I saw someone in the chat saying, I'd rather have them spend that money on roads and bridges in our neighborhoods and our schools. Like, you want to lift people up out of poverty. You want to transform people. Maybe
transform the poorest neighborhoods first, and there you go.
Give them health care. Like healthcare, there's a start.
Yeah.
Although if we're really talking about this is how we should prioritize our money. In the segment before this, we realized there is no prioritization of money.
Right.
That is just like, here's a park, here's this, here's that. So.
War is prioritized.
Right.
That's the only thing, though.
Yeah, but it's just so happy. It's like we're going to spend money on salmon research and a park, and there's no real. Okay, well, where are the areas that are most economically hurt in the United States, and how can we benefit those? How can we help those communities? And we don't. So, let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. We really, really appreciate the conversation on this topic. We've got more news to get to here on this Wednesday. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. I like it. You can always tell in the chat when people are really, interested in the segment, because we can see the chat just flying up and down. Some people saying, thank you so much for this show. Other people saying, I used to love this show. Like some people saying, I really love the show. So some people like a good news conversation around a difficult topic. And then other people sort of are, I think, are conditioned to like get 3-minute segments like on CNN, and they like have to go to commercial break, and they're not used to like the nuance that comes with
that's okay.
Like
if you find that somewhere else.
Yeah, if you are one of those people that likes like CNN or those really short segments with no substance, then that's not what we try to do on this show. We try to provide more context and nuance and go deeper into stories. And we're not paid by billionaires, so we don't have an agenda on this show, but to cover stories that we think matter. Like this next story.
And for those people, I would recommend you check out CNN Plus, where you can find all of the behind the scenes and interesting stuff that you're going to be interested in. And check it out.
Check out CNN Plus if you can find it. I don't think you can find it. Someone here, Diesel Baby, says they never mention the horrific non-Western history of slavery, which is far more vast. Muslim pirates like Dragut and Turkish in the 1500s would raid European towns. Yes, killing thousands, enslaving even more. Yeah. There's some really great viral videos that have happened over the past couple of months when like Don Lemon has confronted people on CNN and asked them about reparations. And you have people saying, yes, we should absolutely talk about this because where slavery in the Congo, like where this is actually happening with Congolese warlords.
Well, the Vikings.
Yes.
So the Vikings, who are they going to?
Reservations. Like we still have Indians on reservations. Like, you know, it's like we there's so many things that, like, that's what I was asking a person too about the reparation. Like, how far back do we go? Should we start with the American Indians maybe, and maybe we have to give them some land back or something?
Oh,
like,
but even
even before that,
even way before that, and the American Indians also had slaves. So
So then where do you go? Okay, the American Indians even had slaves. So okay, let's just keep throwing money. Let's throw money generations, hundreds of years ago for people. Let's just keep throwing money at things and make all these woke people feel better about themselves.
It's even the Vikings. What Philip by the Viking time, slavery was old. You know,
it was old hat.
Yeah, it was just the way of the world. So we have to keep going back.
Yeah, and it's still going on. The bottom line. All right. Let's move on to this next story, which is Ukraine locking down Zelensky in the United States. So President Zelensky of Ukraine going to Washington, D.C. for the first time. The war now 300 days old in Ukraine since the start of the invasion by Russian forces. But of course, it had been going on for 8 years before that with the genocide that's been carried out in the Donbass by the Ukrainian soldiers with the help of NATO forces. That's been happening for 8 years, lest we forget that. On this show, we actually pay attention to true history. So we'll have more on Zelensky's trip in a moment. But first, Ukraine is on the verge of collapse. Zelensky knows it. And the Ukrainians know it, but you're not allowed to talk about it. If you do, you get in trouble. You're not allowed to talk about it. The Ukrainian government is now enforcing stay-at-home orders. Do not leave your house. Lockdown, sound familiar? You're not allowed to leave. I know you don't have electricity, you don't have wheat, you don't have water, you don't have heat. You're not allowed to leave your home. If you do, and if you're even talking about it, you will be punished by the Ukrainian government. No electricity, no energy by other means. Wow, what are you going to do about it? Ukrainians are being told to stay home, don't leave the country. It would lead to a mass migration crisis. Oh, now they're enforcing this? Now Europe wants to push Ukraine to maybe make this happen? Poland is about to collapse with 4 million immigrants from Ukraine inside of Poland. 4 million. A government that cannot handle it is absolutely collapsing right in front of our faces. We learned today from Ukrainian sources that Zelensky's regime is trying to pretend that nothing serious has actually happened, that they have already prohibited citizens from talking about blackouts. If you're a Ukrainian citizen, and I've heard from you, so you can, any of you want to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from you, but I know you're not allowed to talk. You don't have electricity. You probably don't have cell service either. You're not allowed to talk about these blackouts publicly. Shh. Don't let the world know about it. You're not allowed to talk about it. They pretend that those without electricity are part of what they're calling the unfortunate 1%. It's just 1% of you. Just 1%. There's like 1% of you that are without power. Really. It's not true at all. Zelensky keeps telling us that he's winning. We keep hearing this. We hear this in interviews, right? We heard this in the Economist interview. We're winning. We're on the right side. We're pushing them back. Russia's on the, Russia's crumbling. They don't have food. They're crumbling before our eyes. We're winning. This will be a winter of our winning. His general Zelensky telling us that they're winning. but they're lying. And now the Ukrainian general, Zelensky, is threatening its soldiers with fines or worse if these defections continue. Defections, soldiers running away.
No, that's Russia.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
that's
I'm
Russia.
sorry.
You're wrong.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I should have read my propaganda notes from CNN that I didn't get from. No, actually, I'm just checking my notes again. No, it says here it's Ukraine, according to the actual video that we have of the general Zelensky threatening soldiers with fines or worse if these defections continue. Yes, Ukrainian military throwing down their weapons and are running away. Now, we saw this, a number of times throughout the summer. Now it's worse because now they're freezing. And their general in charge, Zelensky, just yesterday issued an order calling for fines or worse for soldiers running away. Watch.
Армія тримається на дисципліні. І якщо прогалини в законодавстві не забезпечує її дотримання, а відмовники можуть сплатити штраф, розмір якого становить до десятків відсотків бойових виплат, або отримати покарання з випробуванням, це несправедливо. Більше того, і це ключове, оголені ділянку фронту змушені закривати собою інші військовослужбовці, що призводить до збільшення втрат особового складу, територій та мирних жителів на них.
So, if you run away, we've got to, find out. Now you're going to be fined for it because we don't have the people that now you've given over this land. So that we're going to fine you for that. And so Ukrainian soldiers are releasing videos now. We saw this over the summer and in the spring. You saw Ukrainian companies releasing videos saying, we don't have weapons, we don't have food. And then there was like a kibosh put on those videos being released. There was like something, I don't know, came from NATO or something. And then suddenly we stopped seeing those videos being released by the Ukrainian military saying, hey, Zelensky, we don't know what you're doing. We don't have food. We don't have weapons. We don't know what to do. We don't have any support out here. And then it was kind of quiet. We haven't seen any of that for quite a while until now it's freezing. And here's one. Here's an example of soldiers releasing videos showing that they are freezing, and they're telling their own leaders that they will hunt them down. Not Putin. We're going to come after you, Zelensky and Zelensky. So to be clear, Ukrainian soldiers telling their general, we're coming after you. Watch.
Хочу передати вітання пану Залужному та нашій зірці Зеленському. Що там, тепло у вас? Може, к нам приїдете сфоткатись? Може, хоч тоді щось пожити привезете? На відео ви кажете, що все у вас добре. Що у бійців немає потреби ні в чому. Хлопці, то може у нас і так тільки херово? А? Які, бойові завдання? Нас норки вбивають, а застуда та гайморит. Де підкріплення? Командування тупо ігнорує нас. Та ще гандони залякують, що посадять. Та саджайте вже. Тільки кажуть, що хлопці до тюряги не доїжджають. Запам'ятайте, ми обов'язково повернемося, ми виживемо. Тільки не заради перемоги, а для того, щоб повісити вас, підарів, в Києві на Майдані. І молитися, щоб росіяни до вас добрались першими. Так хочемо ж в тюрмі живими залишитися.
These are people.
These are human beings whose leadership, of course, is putting them out as cannon fodder, right?
Who still wants this to go on?
They're most likely kids, too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That kid sounded, he sounded 19, maybe 20. You know what I mean? He's a young voice. That is a kid.
Yeah, someone came at me on Twitter for saying something like this. So there was a viral video where a Ukrainian soldier was doing like a TikTok dance. And I was like, that looks like a girl. I'm pretty sure it was a girl who cannot be more than 15 or 16. And this war needs to end now. We can't all collectively agree that a young girl should be out there in war, or a young boy, or anybody who's,
especially with those dancing skills, because she was amazing.
Yeah. And somebody said, you're a Putin apologist. And I said, because I want the young girl to live and not be, yes, because what you just said was give Putin anything he wants. And I'm like, but what you said is give him her life.
Right.
And I can't understand how saying, I do not want to see these people suffering anymore, and I want this to end now. I want the chips to fall however they fall so that the war ends, means that I'm pro-Russian or pro-anything other than just that young girl's life.
I mean, how does somebody come at you like, how dare you? How dare you
speak for her? That's literally what the exchange was, is you just said you want Putin to get what he wants. Because I said, her life is worth more than this. Peace talks now. Oh, you want Putin to get what he wants then? I'm like, then you want her to die?
Next, you're going to be calling for UK nurses to get paid what they're worth. How dare you?
I know, I'm crazy like that.
Unfortunately, it's just that, like, people, when you hear them say that, I know that they've been propagandized. And it's like, it's really hard because I still go back to the thing where it's like, they're listening to the media, they're reading things on social, they have no frame of reference. They're not like us. They don't go down these rabbit holes. They're just getting fed information by who they think they can trust. They think they can trust the media, but they cannot. So I try to not, get upset with those people as much as I can, but it's like, it is frustrating because you know how propaganda is winning this war on social.
It's been the ultimate propaganda war, and that's why so many people are brainwashed about this.
And now we can't even be sure that it wasn't the U.S. government doing it, if you refer to our show yesterday. Yeah. So how do I know it was even a real person?
Yeah. Like you were saying, like they've been talking about how they were taking U.S. stuff down, but there was not a single instance where we saw anything about taking down Russian information that they were saying was the problem. Yeah. Not one request.
No, and of course, all of this, I mean, let's be honest, all of this was created by NATO, right? All of this was created by the United States and NATO. And this is a fact. They have to reap what they sow now, right? They created this mess. 4 million Ukrainians now having to leave Ukraine and going into Poland, and Poland is collapsing. And you're seeing this across Europe now. You're seeing Europe collapse. Right. And the United States is sort of sitting back, and they will reap what they sow soon enough. They're in the throes of collapse as well. But of course, Europe will come first. The collapse of Europe will happen first. And again, this is all their fault. Perhaps that's why Zelensky just flew in to meet with President Biden this afternoon in Washington, D.C. and speak in front of Congress. Now, we got confirmation of this overnight. It was kind of a last minute thing. Zelensky tweeted this out. On my way to the U.S. to strengthen resilience and defense capabilities of Ukraine. In particular, President of the United States and I will discuss cooperation between Ukraine and America. We'll also have a speech at the Congress and a number of bilateral meetings. So then Zelensky arrives. He was greeted. I love this. He was greeted on the tarmac. Here. You think, oh, he's going to meet with President Biden on the tarmac? No. Who does he meet with? That's Rufus Gifford. That's who they sent to meet him. They didn't even send Kamala Harris to meet him. Rufus Gifford is Biden's protocol officer. Like, something's changing, guys. Like, we're now sending Biden's protocol officer to pick the guy up at the airport. That's like sending the butler.
What's a protocol officer? I want one.
I want one. That sounds fun. I want one of those.
Yeah.
A protocol. I need a protocol officer. If there's one person that needs a protocol officer, it's me.
Yes.
I need a protocol officer.
Will they teach my kids to do their chores on free school days?
I thought maybe it was just because like Clayton's maybe like socially awkward at gatherings and he doesn't just know the proper protocol for doing things. And so maybe that honestly might be what a protocol officer does, is make sure that they understand like international customs and things like that, so that you don't.
Oh, I thought it was just
meetings.
more.
I don't know.
No, send him the protocol officer so that on the drive to the White House, you can tell him, hey, make sure you don't wear that ugly green sweater at the White House. It's the White House. You're meeting with the President of the United States, for crying out loud. Don't wear an ugly green sweater. It's not a Christmas party where you wear the ugly Christmas sweater.
When I was a teenager,
Thank you.
If I was mouthing off as a teenager, my dad would go, Natalie, do you have no protocol? No sense of protocol? This was like the word.
You need a protocol droid.
I needed one.
So Mark McKinnon points this out. He says, looks like Zelensky flying to Washington on a U.S. Air Force plane. Yeah, dramatically reduces the possibility of anything happening to the president on his first trip abroad since the Russian invasion began. So I don't know if you noticed that plane in the background a second ago.
I noticed it.
That was, that's a U.S. We sent a plane to pick him up and rolled out the red carpet for the guy.
That's a nice Uber.
There wasn't just there wasn't like 5 people in there. Like, how many people you think were in that plane? How many services? How much did they pay the pilots? Like, how much did that trip cost us? I want to know.
Oh, yeah. We'll lump it in with the $45 billion that he just picked up this afternoon. Yeah. So here's how CNN, CNN's ever effusive about this. They love this. Oh my God, our guy is showing up. Our guy, Zelensky, is coming. Because CNN, of course, a mouthpiece of the intelligence community. This is how they welcomed Zelensky today. Like, fair and honest journalism here at CNN. Watch.
Joining us now for perspective on all of this and how significant it is, CNN's chief international anchor, Christiane Amanpour, who interviewed Ukrainian President Zelensky and the First Lady of Ukraine actually last month. Christiane, this is just incredibly significant. I mean, it's been 300 days. He has not left Ukraine. And now his first trip outside during this war is to the United States.
Absolutely, Caitlin. And of course, the United States is his biggest backer, and he has thanked them over and again, including in my interview, and thanked the American people, knowing that it is taxpayers' money that is helping Ukraine with the weapons that it needs. This is an incredibly important punctuation point because of where we are in the war and because of the change in seasons. You know, many have likened and have pointed to Winston Churchill, the famous British World War II leader, as the epitome and the example of a leader during wartime. And many over
Here's the
last
Churchill
10
comparison.
months of the war in Ukraine,
He's just like Winston Churchill.
Compared Zelensky and his wartime leadership to that of Winston Churchill. And most.
Oh my God, give me a fucking break. I'm sorry, give me a break.
Isn't that annoying?
Oh, so Zelensky is demanding that citizens stay in their homes without a stable supply of food and water and heat. But Zelensky using this as a propaganda tool to raise money for back home.
Well, this comes after FIFA over the weekend refused to play a clip that I did not bring to, where he wanted to issue a statement about Ukraine right before the World Cup final.
Right.
And FIFA said, no, we're not getting involved in this and we're not playing this. And the Ukrainian government gave them on Twitter, they said, you still have a few more hours to decide. You still can do the right thing. Show Zelensky's message. I did watch it, and he's saying, you know, every father wants to take his son to a football game. We should have a world where that's okay. I propose this peace organization, but that's not peace talk, so he's not actually moving towards peace. But I do think it's telling because the Oscars and the Grammys can have him or his, you know, representatives on, and FIFA is saying, no, we're not choosing sides in a war, in a football game. So, too much politics.
Well, and I have a question really quick about going back to the plane really quick. Is that considered a military jet? Like, did that military plane land in Ukraine, or did they pick him up elsewhere? Like, because isn't that kind of like in
Poland?
You know, in Poland. Okay, I was going to say, because if that landing in Ukraine, that's like the United States actually moving in a military vehicle. Am I not?
Yeah. But no, they picked him up in Poland. So he took a train from Poland, from Kiev into Poland, and then from there we put him on a plane, and then gave him a limousine escort to the White House. Byron York pointing this out. According to the Associated Press a few minutes ago, Zelensky is going to tell Congress that the $48 billion that we're giving them right now in this new bill is not enough, according to Byron York. He says the AP reporting this, Zelensky is apparently prepared to tell Congress that whatever the U.S. has given Ukraine, $45 billion in new aid under new consideration, is not enough. And a reminder, Olena Zelensky, of course, when she went to Paris just recently, this was confirmed. She went and she was there asking money from Macron. Turns out she went on a shopping spree in Paris and spent $40,000 in a shopping spree while in Paris, while demanding that we give her more money. So she's in Paris.
Well, you can't go out asking for more money looking broke, man. Come on.
No,
that's like
true.
That's just like request 101.
No, that's like requesting money, like failure 101. Like how do you or like if I'm gonna ask somebody for money, I don't wear a tux and pull up in my Bentley and be like, hey, can I have some money?
Like you need to have you need to have like a little tin cup. Yeah, like a little tin cup, and you put on glasses to make you look like you're blind.
But glamour is an important part of her look. She has to look Jackie O. And they realize that she's an asset. Even 60 Minutes said that they weaponize her.
Yeah.
Because she's beautiful, and I understand it from a propaganda standpoint, absolutely.
So Glenn Greenwald this morning tweeted this, said, the U.S. Congress is about to send another $44 billion to Boeing, Raytheon, and the CIA for the war in Ukraine. That's a total of $100 billion sent by the United States in 10 months. The entire Russian military budget for the year is $65 billion. So Zelensky's schedule, visiting the White House for a meeting, sitting down with the president. He did that. He showed up. Before that he got there, though, I don't know who did it, but all over D.C. this afternoon, there was like an army of people going around flagpoles and light posts, putting up the Ukrainian flag all over Washington, D.C. Get those flags up, and also make sure that they are higher up than the American flag. Like, they're higher on the stand than the American flags. All these Ukrainian flags, we just have them everywhere. We're going to go stick them all. Look, let's stick it higher than the American flag. All over D.C. today. So,
well, and I wanted to ask really quick, when Zelensky is doing these tours and he's asking for this money, does he ever break down what it's for, or does he just say, I just need money? Like, it doesn't matter what it's for, like weapons or whatever, but is he ever specific as like where that money is going?
He has before given us a laundry list of, you know, these guns, these bullets, these tanks.
Like these things we want. We want HIMARS, we want these things, we want this type of weapon. And then they get all destroyed, or they're, you know, again, the Patriot missile system. We had Scott Ritter on the other night saying that they don't work. They've never worked. It's been it's ridiculous. And you need actual number of human beings to run the things. It's going to be a total disaster, but that's what he wants. So here he is showing up at the White House. Here he is officially meeting with President Biden and Jill Biden. He wore his best Christmas sweater. So he couldn't even, for the president of the United States, all of the billions that we've sent the guy, he still has to wear this ugly green Christmas sweater.
We know his wife went shopping. Why can't he dress nice too? And
yeah, exactly.
She bought him new green sweaters.
Oh, okay.
So here is Biden and Zelensky sitting by the fire. He's got his Ukrainian garb on. And here's President Biden basically telling him that, you know, Russia continues to attack civilians, and that's their mission, and we stand behind you. Listen.
The attack on innocent Ukrainian people for no reason other than intimidate. And he's escalated his assault on civilians after hitting schools, orphanages, hospitals, landmarks.
All debunked.
And he's trying to use winter as a weapon. And but the Ukrainian people continue to inspire the world. I mean that sincerely. Not just inspire us, but inspire the world with their courage and how they have chosen.
Yeah. So he says that Putin is attacking schools, churches, theaters, civilian targets. Okay.
Orphanages, anything that grabs your heartstrings.
Yeah.
And anything that grabbed your heartstrings, they're attacking.
Orphanages. Yeah, like Tiny Tim is, you know, like he literally is going after like blind orphanages.
Like he's in there in the war room. Is that an orphanage? Take it out.
Take it out.
So, good question is, why weren't those evacuated if you had all this time, you know, prepping for war and all of that? You know, Clayton and I were discussing this tactic of a leader wearing military garb and which leaders in history have done this to great effect. And what is it showing us? Because he's now thousands of miles from the battlefield. I thought originally it sort of meant I'm here too. I'm capable of taking up arms too. But in the White House, it's just sort of a Franco type move. You know, like
I just
leader
I feel it makes him more relatable. He's like relatable
Fidel Castro.
He's not in a suit.
Like Fidel Castro, like he just wears fatigues every day and a hat. Like, and like I said, it makes it very easy. You know, it makes it very easy to like go to your closet in the morning. Like, what am I wearing today here in Ukraine? It's cold.
Maybe those of you in the chat can think of other leaders who dressed out like a baseball coach.
Well, and think of people are going to be like, oh, but he's so modest. You know, he doesn't wear suits. He doesn't have these high, really expensive clothing. He's doing his job. Like there are people that will mean something to.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. He's there. He's constantly working. You know, he's deep in the trenches. But what I wanted to bring this home on this point, which is what we heard from a couple of White House officials over the past 24 hours. And it's very, very subtle. I want to play this video and see if you can pick up on where this new tone of this war and what this means, because they know what's about to happen. They know that Ukraine is about to totally be wiped off the map, and they know that Putin is about to unleash a massive winter offensive to finally put an end to the genocide in the Donbass and secure that section of the country. So we know what's coming. Here's where the way the Biden administration is now sort of playing this thing. Listen.
We are in a new phase, if you will. This winter's coming. Mr. Putin has stepped up his attacks on civilian infrastructure, civilian targets. Air defense capabilities are now the most important capability that Ukraine needs and must have to help defend itself. So the president really believed that as we approach winter, as we enter clearly and have been in a sort of a new phase in this war, Mr. Putin's aggression, that this was a good time for the two leaders to sit down face to face and talk about not only what the United States is doing now and will continue to do going forward, but how we eventually try to work towards what President Zelensky has called a just peace.
So you do think that the two leaders today will...
So did you catch it there? The new phase. The new phase, multiple times saying the new phase. So now you're going to hear this from the White House. You're going to hear it from, mark my words, tomorrow you'll hear it from Jean-Pierre at the White House press podium. The new phase. You'll hear it from President Biden. That talking point is now going to be out there. So what's this new phase? What is the new phase? Well, it'll be interesting to hear what this new phase is. We're going to give you billions more. They just secured $45 billion. We're sending more weapons. We're doing additional training now of Ukrainian soldiers. What is the new phase? You're going to be stepping down as the president of the country, and we're going to install our new puppet? I mean, I don't know. We'll throw it out there. You guys let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. All right, we've got one more story I want to get to today, and it brings us to CNN. The cozy relationship between the establishment media and the Pentagon was on full display yesterday in the Pentagon briefing room. It's the place where reporters go so that the deep state plants stories inside the mainstream media. When you're in this room, you're on one of the, Associated Press, CNN, you're one of the big boys, right? Mm-hmm. So basically an arm of the Pentagon. And most of the people that show up in these Pentagon briefing rooms are tools of the deep state. Not at Redacted, because we're not invited to that room. If we were there, we would actually ask serious questions instead of parroting the bullshit that they feed to you. And when I say deep state, I actually mean the permanent government, the unelected permanent government. So yesterday was the last day that Barbara Starr, the reporter from CNN, was on the job. It was her last time at a Pentagon briefing. She's leaving CNN, retiring after so many years. And she was there at the Pentagon for many, many years, parroting their talking points and then regurgitating those things on CNN. So, of course, they would really be sad to see her go. Who is going to, sit in her place now and carry the water for the Pentagon? So here is Barbara Starr. You probably recognize her over the years. You've seen her on CNN. There she is, parroting all sorts of Pentagon talking points and carrying the water for the Pentagon. So here was the moment yesterday when the Pentagon decided to devote a portion of their press conference to thank Starr for her, quote, service to the Pentagon. Watch this.
So before we conclude here, I just have one last final thing to say. Would like to take this opportunity to say farewell to our media colleague, Miss Barbara Starr. Barbara has reported for CNN for over 20 years and has been a fixture in the Pentagon press corps. And today marks her final day with CNN after a storied and truly impressive career. So Barbara, on behalf of Secretary of Defense Austin, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Milley, and the entire Department of Defense, I would like to extend a special congratulations and thank you for your many years of timely, insightful, and important reporting on our nation's most pressing defense issues. And as someone who has worked with you for many of those last 20 years, and someone who has had to take your late night phone calls and emails and answer your tough but fair questions, I can say from personal experience that the U.S. public and audiences worldwide have been well served by your in-depth reporting from the Pentagon, your journalistic integrity, and your determination to tell the stories of service members worldwide and to ensure the government and DoD remain transparent and accountable to the taxpayers and the American public they serve. Congratulations again, and we wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you very kindly.
And a standing ovation for carrying the water for us for so many years. Our colleague. So there are plenty of tweets in celebration of this stunning moment, and I just love the tweets. I love the Ukrainian flag in this guy's Twitter bio, by the way. Respect from your peers. That's nice to see. So applause all around. Here's another one, Anthony Hatcher. This is refreshing and delightful on so many levels. Respect for journalism. Hashtag respect for... No, it's not respect for actual journalism. That's not at all what that is. Here's another one. That's a lovely gesture from Paul Vermeerlin, who is a cookie monster. Well done. That's a lovely gesture.
So are you saying if somebody did their...
What?
Are you saying that if someone did their job right, the Pentagon should be so glad to see you leave?
Yes.
If you're actually asking real questions?
Yes. Like when John McCain, hold on a second. When John McCain went on Meet the Press, Senator John McCain went on Meet the Press, and Tim Russert interviewed him. And at the end of it, he says, "Thanks so much, Senator McCain, for joining us. We appreciate it." He goes, "Well, thanks, Tim. That was like getting a proctology exam. I can't say I enjoyed it."
That's how
that should go. That's how that should go. Not applause and standing ovations.
Let Philip talk.
I agree 100%. Like the relationship between the media, like journalism, and the government, who like as the fourth state or like they should be antagonistic. That should be the nature of the relationship.
Yes.
It should always be slightly uncomfortable. If a government official is comfortable with the press, that means they're not the press. They're just an arm of the propaganda, because it has to be. It needs to be antagonistic.
Yes, by their very nature. Right. And so, again, here's Caitlin Johnstone. She had a fabulous quote on this today. We love Caitlin Johnstone. She said, "I actually can't think of a clearer sign that the United States does not have a free and independent press than for the U.S. military to be gushing affectionately about the career of a longtime CNN Pentagon correspondent myself. And I can't think of a more disgraceful way for a journalist to retire than with a standing ovation at the Pentagon. Surely there can be no clearer mark of journalistic failure than being thanked by the U.S. military for your lifetime of service. If your journalistic relationship with the corrupt, murderous U.S. military was ever anything other than oppositional, and their feelings towards you anything but hostile, it's because you were never a journalist. You were their PR agent." Ouch.
Wow.
Starr has been parroting Pentagon fake talking points for years. Here are a few examples that Caitlin really found great. Perhaps most notably, the Syrian gas attacks. That Assad was gassing his own people. Total garbage. Totally debunked by anyone who actually wants to spend the time looking at it.
Yes.
Totally made up and fabricated by the West, and parroted and carried by Barbara Starr on CNN. Watch.
This Syrian chemical weapons site near Aleppo is just 10 miles from the latest fighting, one of dozens of chemical weapons sites across Syria.
Yeah, not true.
No.
Not true. Total propaganda that you just parroted from your friends that gave you a standing ovation. Here's another one. "We need some PR work, Barbara." Hey, Barbara, late night call from your friend. You remember me? "We need some PR work for our crack team of snipers. Can you put together a news package for us real quick showing off how awesome they are?" Watch.
Jordan's crack counterterrorism battalion. Assaulting compounds, just one of their skills. Expert snipers, always ready. The same skills U.S. commandos are practicing here. We are showing a mock house used for training. U.S. troops have seen this before. This is the kind of training those Navy SEALs got before they assaulted Osama bin Laden's compound, coming up a dark staircase, not knowing what is waiting for them at the top.
And here's my favorite one. Barbara Starr praising the assassination, the killing of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, which Obama called for and which totally destabilized the region. And yeah, there's so much to say about Muammar Gaddafi, but I'll just let Barbara Starr say it because she loves it.
For the president, this is now a third national security plus, a win, if you will, after Osama bin Laden and the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki, the al-Qaeda operative in Yemen. Now, you know, a third in a row where his strategy of letting NATO take the lead on this has apparently, by all accounts, perhaps worked at the end of the day. So this will be something that will also have political play in the United States. A plus for the White House. It'll be hard to see how the Republican presidential candidates may decide to play it and what they will criticize now at this point. But what will come next is...
Yeah. Well, I mean, how are you going to criticize this amazing moment? Like, we just assassinated the leader of Libya. Like, Like, this is an amazing congratulations to the Pentagon for doing this and totally.
For his opposition to the West.
Yeah, because he stood up to the West. We went and assassinated him.
And his belief in a secular Arab and independent Arab nation.
Yeah. Screw you, Gaddafi. You can't have that. You can't be independent and be nuclear independent also. You can't do that. Energy independent from the United States. We're going to come in and assassinate you.
And
good job.
She also mentioned Anwar al-Awlaki, and I did a story way back about his son and everything, and how he was actually trying to teach children that just because Americans come over here and kill our family doesn't mean that the Americans deserve to die. Like, he was trying to stop that divide and let these kids not turn into terrorists, and they deemed him a terrorist. And he was the first American citizen that was ever assassinated by a U.S. president. And she's praising that too.
So she loves it. It's great for Obama. And finally, here is a CENTCOM. CENTCOM sent out congratulations as well, not to be outdone by the Pentagon. Here's U.S. Central Command. Today closes a remarkable, like, the U.S. Central Command sent out a tweet. A remarkable career for CNN's Barbara Starr, a leader in the Pentagon press corps. Her aggressive reporting and tireless commitment to the truth brought this nation closer to its military. She will forever be missed. Isn't that so telling?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, she's an honest and open reporter, right? So much so that you think you'd be able to go and read her tweets publicly, right? She's a transparent reporter. But if you go to her Twitter page, no, you can't. Her tweets are protected, so you can't read her tweets. I guess just the people that she deems are able. Oh, you're not a free and open press person, Barbara Starr? Nope. No, you're not. But someone did respond, even though we can't see it. We can see some of her responses. And here's a general, Russell Honore. General, well, Ms. Starr, I met you during my time in Joint Chief of Staff. It was, as it was, you knew a lot more than I did. And we traveled together during Katrina. You know Department of Defense better than most. We will miss you. Thanks for your service to our democracy. Free and independent press. CNN. Yeah. I mean, clown show. I mean, this is what we have for a free press in the United States.
Yeah. You know, when you first started this segment, I was like, well, she seems like a nice, older lady ready to retire. Are we really going to hit on her? And then I see these, like, you're celebrating an assassination of a foreign leader on behalf of Obama.
That's how she gets away with it.
I'm like,
well, this is why
that's not okay.
This is like the Dolores Umbridge of news.
She is a Dolores Umbridge.
She looks like a nice, old lady. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Philip.
No, I was going to say this is why they have rules against, and like discourage spouses from testifying against each other in a trial, because you can't really trust that they're going to tell the truth because they're in bed with that person.
Yes.
So that it's like this is why you have those kinds of divides in conflict of interest such as this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just an observation.
No, it's a great point. Putting up, and again, anytime you're working for these organizations that make money off of war, right? They profit from it. CNN does. And also, how many members of the Pentagon are paid by CNN on the payroll?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a totally incestuous relationship. Anyway, I wanted to bring you that story. Love to hear your thoughts on that, on this cozy relationship with the press and the Pentagon. Well, that's going to do it for us today on Redacted. Please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out when you subscribe because, we're up against the algorithm warriors that we are up against the YouTube algorithm warriors. Rumble, not so much. They're much kinder because they honor us with no censorship. So please subscribe on Rumble if you're watching us on Rumble or YouTube. We welcome you either way. We've got to push these algorithms in the right direction. So much love to all of you. We'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We're live Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So we will see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.